So earlier this week, I talked about using HMAC signatures to create signed URLs that allow you to determine whether or not a URL has been tampered with. And one use case in which this could be helpful is sending unsubscribe links within a marketing email. So here I have my MailHog SMTP server on my local development environment. And we have this page for sending emails. And this is going to send to 3 mock users, and each one of those emails is going to contain an unsubscribe link. So let's take a look. Let's send some emails. That's done. If we pop back into MailHog, you can see that we sent to Molly, Arnold, and Kim. And if we jump into one of these, they're going to have an unsubscribe link, and all of them are going to have an unsubscribe link, but you'll see that they're going to be different. You can't really see it in the video, but they all have different user IDs and signatures, but we'll get more into the code itself. But let's take a look at Molly here. Let's go to her unsubscribe page. And you can see here is the user ID for one and the signature. And here is our HMAC SHA-256 signature, or HMAC signature. And this page presents the user with a form that allows them to manage their subscription without having to actually log into the application, which is a point of convenience. We can see that Molly is currently subscribed, and you can see that she can unsubscribe, which refreshes the page and processes that request, telling her now that she's unsubscribed. At any point, she could then come back in and subscribe again or unsubscribe. So right now she's unsubscribed, and let's go ahead and just delete all these messages. And let's send again. And if we jump back in here, you'll see that this time, instead of 3 emails, only 2 went out to Kim and Arnold. Molly did not receive an email, and that's because she's currently unsubscribed. Now let's go ahead and just delete these all again. And let's pop back into Molly and let's just resubscribe her. And we'll go ahead and send emails again. And this time you'll see that now all 3 of our mock users, Kim, Arnold, and Molly, received a marketing email, and that's because she is currently subscribed. So let's take a look at the code to see how this works. If we jump into the application CFC, when the application boots up, I'm instantiating my URL signer. We looked at the URL signer in a previous post, so I'm not going to bother talking about it again, other than to say that the default hashing algorithm is the HMAC SHA-256, and it's going to be using a base64 URL encoding by default. We then set up our 3 mock users, and each one of our mock users here you'll see has a subscribed property set to true, and that's going to be what determines whether or not they're receiving marketing emails. Very simple stuff here. I'm trying to keep this as lightweight as possible. In that send email page that's actually sending out the emails, you'll see that I'm going to be looping over our users. If the user's subscribe property is set to false, we're going to skip over them. And that's what's preventing the user from receiving marketing emails when they're currently unsubscribed. If they are subscribed, then what we're going to do is generate a signature. And to generate that signature, we're going to pass in the user ID, and that is a value that we have in the URL here. And then I'm also passing this additional feature, which I am not passing in the URL. There's no mention of feature here. And I'm sort of just using this as a kind of a pepper to differentiate the unsubscribe workflow from other workflows. This isn't strictly needed, and I'm sure if I was more confident about how all of the security aspects of this work, the very low-level security aspects, I would just remove this altogether and say that the HMAC signature is significantly hard to reverse engineer, so we only need the user ID. So this is more a point of insecurity. Don't take this as a point of best practice. Once we have our signature, though, we can then go ahead and create an unsubscribe URL. And you can see I'm including both the user ID and the signature in that URL. And then we send out an email to that user. As per a recent post, again, I always like to keep my email content separate from the consuming context, in this case, the CF mail tag. Very little going on here in the CF mail. It's basically just the name and the unsubscribe URL. Let's not even focus on it. So that email goes out, the user gets it in their inbox, as we saw in the MailHog demo. And then when they click on that link, they get taken to this unsubscribe page. The very first thing we do at the top of the unsubscribe page is test the signature against the provided signature. So essentially what the URL signer is doing is taking those same inputs, the user ID and our little feature pepper here, regenerates the signature internally, and then make sure it's an exact letter for letter, character for character copy of the provided signature. And if it's not, it throws an error. If it is, it allows the request to continue. So if we get to this point without throwing an error, we can be confident that the URL has not been tampered with, meaning that the URL.userid parameter is the right parameter. It hasn't been messed with. This ensures that the user who accessed this link has access to this user's email account. And for the sake of this demo, we're going to consider that good enough. And at that point, we can go ahead and grab the user out of memory and process the form. And in this case, when we process the form or when we post the form, we have to be sure to include the user ID and the signature in the URL for the form action, so that every time the user processes the every time the user processes the form, the URL parameters get reposted and we're able to re-verify the signature at the top before we actually, again, get the user and process the data. So an unsubscribed link has a bunch of unique characteristics. One is that it has to be used multiple times, meaning when we're submitting the form here, that same set of data is being passed over and over again. It also probably shouldn't be time boxed. If I have an email system and I want to search my history and I find this marketing email that was sent out 6 months ago, I should probably be able to use that unsubscribe URL. It probably shouldn't stop working, because what we're trying to do is create the most convenient access for the user. Users are unsubscribing because they're frustrated. If Molly were to hit this link and then be prompted to log into the application to manage her subscriptions, she'd be flipping tables, because what the heck, all she wants to do is stop hearing from us. The last thing she wants to do is get more deeply embedded with the application workflow. And then, of course, these URLs have to be user specific, and that's where the user ID parameter comes in. And of course, they have to be secure, which is where the HMAC signature comes into play. So all to say, these unsubscribe links, I think, is a great example of where something like a signed URL can come into play. And hopefully this has been interesting for you and maybe points you in the right direction.